There is a specific kind of silence that exists in a house built on money. A silence that is not merely the absence of noise, but rather the presence of order. A curated stillness that demands you make yourself small. I have lived inside that silence for 6 months now, working within the sprawling estate of Alexander Thorne, a man whose name is synonymous with innovation, and whose fortune is large enough to buy out the small town where I grew up. My name is Ivy, and I am 44 years old, an age where a woman knows the weight of her own history and the value of her own privacy. I am not invisible, though the nature of my work often requires me to act as though I am. I am a housekeeper, a manager of dust and light, a guardian of the pristine surfaces that define his life. But there is a secret tucked away in the rhythm of my days, a secret that lives in the quiet space between the polishing of silver and the folding of linens. It is a secret about who I was before I became the woman who scrubs the floors of his empire. And it is a secret about who he was before the world decided to watch his every move. We are not strangers, not really, though he looks at me and sees only the uniform, the neutral colors, the efficient hands that ensure his life runs without friction. I see the lines around his eyes that weren't there 20 years ago, the way he rubs his temple when the pressure of a merger becomes too much, the specific way he takes his coffee, black and without sugar, just as he did when he was sleeping on a friend's couch and dreaming of building something that mattered. I remember all of it. I remember the heat of that summer, the smell of rain on hot asphalt, the way he used to say my name like it was a promise he intended to keep. But that was a lifetime ago, before the billions, before the boardrooms, before the misunderstanding that drove us apart and left me picking up the pieces of a life I hadn't planned on losing. I took this job out of necessity, not design. When the medical bills for my mother began to pile up, when the small business I had tried to build collapsed under the weight of a recession that didn't care about my resilience, I needed work that paid immediately and reliably. I did not know this was his house when I applied through the agency. The name was listed under a holding company, a shell entity that obscured the owner until I walked through the front door and saw the portrait in the foyer. It was too late to turn back. I needed the paycheck, and I told myself I could handle it. I could be professional. I could be a ghost in his hallway, servicing his needs without reminding him of the past, without reminding myself of the pain. I told myself that love, when it is truly over, becomes a kind of data, something you file away and access only when necessary. But the human heart is not a filing cabinet, and memory is not a document you can delete. It lives in the muscle, in the reflex, in the way your breath catches when you hear a specific tone of voice. So I worked. I cleaned. I maintained the distance. I became part of the architecture of his life, a fixed point in his periphery that he acknowledged with a nod or a brief instruction, nothing more. He is a man of few words, Alexander. The wealth has hardened him, or perhaps the loneliness has. He moves through the house like a king in a castle he built himself, isolated by the very walls that protect him. I watched him from the corners of rooms, observing the way he carried the weight of his success. It is a heavy thing, success. It bends the spine. It makes you suspicious of kindness because you begin to wonder what people want from you. I understood that. I had learned that lesson myself, so I gave him nothing but competence. I gave him a clean home and a quiet environment. I did not seek his attention. I did not try to remind him. I thought I was safe. I thought the past was buried deep enough that it would never surface, never interrupt the careful equilibrium we had established. But equilibrium is a fragile thing, especially when it is built on a foundation of omission. I should have known that secrets have a way of leaking out, of finding the light when you least expect them. It happened on a Tuesday, a day like any other, gray and soft with the promise of rain. I had prepared my lunch as I always did, simple and practical, something I could eat quickly in the staff quarters without taking too much time away from my duties. I had packed a sandwich, an apple, and a small container of leftovers from the night before. I had also, out of a habit I could not break, tucked a small photograph into the side pocket of my lunchbox. It was not a photograph of him, not exactly. It was a photograph of us, taken years ago, before the money, before the fame. We were sitting on a park bench, sharing a bag of cheap pretzels, laughing at something he had said. I looked young, hopeful. He looked unburdened. I kept it not to dwell on the past, but to remind myself of who I was before the hardship, before the necessity of this job. It was a touchstone, a reminder that I had been loved once, truly and deeply, and that I was worthy of that love even if I was currently scrubbing baseboards for the man who had given it to me. I thought it was hidden. I thought it was safe. But I had been rushing that morning, distracted by a call from the hospital regarding my mother's follow-up appointment, and I had not latched the side pocket completely. I left the lunchbox on the counter in the kitchen, intending to retrieve it before I started my afternoon rounds. I was in the laundry room, folding sheets, when I heard the footstep. It was a heavy step, deliberate. Alexander rarely came into the kitchen during the day. He usually worked in his study or flew out to meetings. But today, he was here. I froze, my hands stilling on the crisp white linen. I listened to the sound of the refrigerator opening, the sound of the lunchbox being moved. I heard the slight clatter of the container shifting. And then, silence. A long, stretching silence that felt like a physical weight in the air. I knew what had happened. I knew the pocket had sprung open. I knew he had seen the photograph. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that threatened to give me away. I should have gone in there. I should have walked in and explained, claimed the photo, dismissed it as a mistake. But I didn't. I stayed in the laundry room. I finished folding the sheet. I placed it on the pile. I waited. This is who I am. I am not a woman who panics. I am a woman who assesses. I needed to understand what this meant before I reacted. If he had seen it, if he had recognized me, the dynamic of this house would change instantly. I would no longer be the staff. I would be the ghost from his past, the woman who got away, the complication he didn't need. Or, perhaps worse, he would feel pity. He would feel obligated. And I could not survive on his pity. I would rather scrub floors for the rest of my life than be a charity case to the man I once loved. So I waited. I let the moment settle. I let him process what he had seen. It was an act of emotional intelligence, this pause. It was the choice to seek clarity over anger, to understand the root of the reaction before engaging with the symptom. I finished my work in the laundry room. I walked back to the kitchen 10 minutes later, my face composed, my expression neutral. The lunchbox was still on the counter. The pocket was closed now. Alexander was gone. There was no note, no message, no indication of what he had thought, but the air in the room felt different. It felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. I took my lunchbox. I went to the staff quarters. I ate my sandwich without tasting it. I spent the rest of the day working, but I was aware of him. I could feel his presence in the house even when I couldn't see him. He was watching. I could feel the weight of his gaze on my back when I vacuumed the study. I could feel it when I arranged the flowers in the dining room. He was trying to reconcile the woman in the photograph with the woman in the uniform. He was trying to solve the puzzle of why I was here, why I hadn't said anything, why I was hiding in plain sight. And I was trying to decide if I should let him solve it. The distance between us grew that day, but it was a different kind of distance. Before, it was the distance of stranger and employer. Now, it was the distance of two people who know a truth but haven't spoken it. It was a tension that hummed in the walls, in the floorboards, in the space between our breaths. I went home that evening to my small apartment, the one I could afford because of this job, and I sat at my kitchen table and thought about the photograph. I thought about the risk I had taken by keeping it. I thought about the fear that had kept me silent for 6 months. I realized then that silence is not safety. Silence is just a delay. The truth was going to come out eventually, either because I chose to speak it or because life forced it out of me. And I preferred to choose. I preferred to control the narrative of my own life, but I needed to be sure of his intent. I needed to know if he was angry, if he felt betrayed, or if he was feeling the same ache that I was feeling. So I decided to wait. I decided to observe. This is the escalation of the conflict, not through shouting or confrontation, but through the quiet gathering of facts. I watched him for the next week. I noted the changes in his routine. He began coming home earlier. He began spending more time in the kitchen, ostensibly working on his laptop, but I knew he was waiting for me to appear. He left things out. He left books on the table that he knew I would have to tidy. He left his coffee cup on the counter instead of putting it in the dishwasher, a small breach of his own rules that signaled he wanted an interaction, a reason for me to speak to him. I respected the signal, but I did not rush it. I cleaned the cup. I put the book away. I maintained my professionalism. I was testing him, in a way. I was testing his patience. I was testing whether he valued the truth enough to pursue it, or whether he would let the discomfort fade until things went back to normal. I knew him well enough to know that he was not a man who let things go. He was a solver of problems, and I was the problem. The pressure built. I could see it in the way he held himself, the tension in his shoulders. He was struggling with the decision to ask. He was likely worried about overstepping, about violating the boundary between employer and employee. He is a man who respects the law, who respects contracts and agreements. He would not want to coerce me. He would want me to come to him voluntarily. And that was what I was waiting for. I wanted him to ask because he cared, not because he was curious. I wanted him to ask because the silence was hurting him too. It took 10 days. 10 days of quiet observation, of measured movements, of unspoken communication. On the following Tuesday, exactly 1 week after the incident with the lunchbox, he asked me to stay late. It was a Friday evening, the sun setting over the grounds, casting long shadows across the lawn. He found me in the hallway, finishing the vacuuming. He did not look at me directly at first. He looked at the floor, then at the window, then finally at me. His voice was calm, controlled, but there was an undercurrent of something else, something vulnerable. He asked me if I could come to the study for a moment. He said there was a matter regarding the household inventory that he needed to discuss. It was a lie, of course. There was no inventory issue. We both knew it. But it was a polite lie, a way to invite me into a private space without demanding it. I nodded. I turned off the vacuum. I followed him. The study is his sanctuary. It is lined with books he has read and books he intends to read, filled with the smell of leather and old paper. He stood behind his desk, not sitting. He waited for me to enter, then closed the door. The sound of the latch clicking shut was loud in the silence. He did not offer me a seat. He did not offer me water. He simply stood there, looking at me, and for the first time in 20 years, he really looked at me. He looked past the uniform, past the age lines, past the fatigue of the work. He looked for the girl in the photograph. I stood my ground. I did not look away. I did not fidget. I waited for him to speak. He took a breath. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something. It was the photograph. He had kept it. He had taken it from my lunchbox. He placed it on the desk between us. It lay there, face up, a small rectangle of memory that held the weight of our entire history. He looked at the photo, then at me. His voice was low, rough with emotion he was trying to suppress. He asked me why I hadn't said anything. He asked me why I was here. He asked me if I was trying to hurt him. These were the questions I had expected, but hearing them aloud in this room, with the door closed, changed everything. It was no longer a theoretical conflict. It was real. I looked at the photo. I looked at him. I chose my words carefully. I told him the truth. I told him that I needed the job. I told him that I did not want his pity. I told him that I did not want to be the woman from his past who came crawling back when she had nowhere else to go. I told him that I wanted to be judged on my work, not on my history. I spoke calmly. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I explained that I had planned to leave once I had saved enough money to stabilize my situation, that I had no intention of disrupting his life. I told him that the photograph was a mistake, a habit I hadn't broken, and that I understood if he wanted me to leave immediately. I offered him my resignation. I told him I would work out the week and then go. It was the only logical move. It was the only way to preserve my dignity. I stood there and waited for him to accept it. I watched his face. I saw the conflict there. I saw the anger warring with the relief. He did not want me to leave. I could see it in the way his hand tightened on the edge of the desk. He did not want me to be a stranger. He did not want the past to remain buried. He shook his head. He said no. He said he did not want my resignation. He said he wanted the truth, all of it. He wanted to know why I had really come back. He wanted to know if I hated him. This was the turn. This was the moment where the misunderstanding could have shattered us, or where the truth could set us free. I looked at him and I realized that he was afraid. The billionaire, the man who owned buildings and companies, was afraid of me. He was afraid that I blamed him for the way things ended. He was afraid that I had come here for revenge. And I realized that I had been afraid of the same thing. I had been afraid that he would see me and feel nothing. I had been afraid that the love we had was dead and that I was haunting a graveyard. So I took a step forward. I crossed the boundary of the desk. I stood on the same side as him. I told him that I did not hate him. I told him that I had never hated him. I told him that the end of us was not his fault, and it was not my fault. It was circumstance. It was timing. It was the cruelty of a world that pulls people in different directions when they are too young to know how to hold on. I told him that I kept the photograph because I needed to remember that I was capable of being loved, not because I wanted to use it against him. I told him that seeing him every day was hard, but that I could do it because I respected him. I told him that I would not stay if he felt uncomfortable. I told him that his comfort was paramount. And then he did something I did not expect. He reached out. He did not touch me. He reached for the photograph. He picked it up. He looked at it again. He said that he had looked at it every night for the past week. He said that he had tried to remember the day it was taken. He said that he had realized that he had spent 20 years building a life that looked successful but felt empty, and that seeing me had reminded him of the part of himself he had lost. He said that he didn't care about the job, he didn't care about the protocol. He cared that I was here. He cared that I was alive. He cared that I was standing in front of him. This was the emotional breakthrough. The truth surfaced not as a weapon, but as a bridge. The misunderstanding was shattered not by argument, but by admission. We stood there in the study, the sun gone now, the room lit only by the desk lamp, and we talked. We talked for hours. We did not talk about the money. We did not talk about the house. We talked about the years in between. I told him about my mother. I told him about the business that failed. I told him about the loneliness of being 44 and starting over. He told me about the pressure of the board. He told me about the divorce that had happened 5 years ago, a detail I had not known, a detail that explained the hardness in his eyes. He told me about the nights he spent wondering where I was, wondering if I was happy. He told me that he had never stopped looking for me, not really, but that he had been afraid to find me because he was afraid I would reject him. We were two people who had been guarding our hearts, protecting ourselves from the pain of the past, only to find that the pain was still there, waiting for us to acknowledge it. The walls came down, not all at once, but brick by brick. He offered me a chair. I sat. He sat opposite me. The desk was no longer a barrier. It was just a piece of furniture. We ordered food. We ate in the study like we used to eat on the floor of his old apartment. We laughed. It was a strange sound, laughter in that room, but it was necessary. It broke the tension. It reminded us that we were human. As the night wore on, the conversation shifted from the past to the present. He asked me what I wanted. He asked me what I needed. I told him I needed stability. I told him I needed to know that I was not a charity case. He told me that he did not want to hire me as a housekeeper anymore. He said that he wanted to hire me as a partner. Not a business partner, but a life partner. He said that he wanted to try again. He said that he knew we were older, that we were different, but that he believed the foundation was still there. I listened. I did not say yes immediately. I am not a woman who makes impulsive decisions. I considered his words. I considered the risk. I considered the possibility that this was a moment of weakness, a reaction to the shock of finding me. I told him that I needed time. I told him that I needed to know that this was not about guilt. I told him that I needed to know that he loved me for who I am now, not for who I was in the photograph. He nodded. He said he understood. He said he would wait. He said he would not change my job status until I was ready. He said he would not pressure me. This was the falling action, the healing process. It was not a grand gesture. It was not a public declaration. It was a quiet agreement to proceed with care. It was a recognition that trust is not given, it is earned. We agreed to start over, not as employer and employee, but as two adults who know each other's history and choose to build a future anyway. I finished the week as his housekeeper. I cleaned the rooms. I folded the linens, but the silence was different. It was no longer the silence of order. It was the silence of anticipation. He would leave notes for me. Not instructions, but questions. How was your day? Did you call your mother? Do you need anything? Small things, gentle things. I would leave notes back. I am fine. She is stable. No, thank you. We were communicating. We were rebuilding the language of us. At the end of the week, I handed in my resignation. It was formal. It was professional. I thanked him for the opportunity. I told him that I had secured enough savings to manage for a while. He accepted it. He did not argue. He respected my need to stand on my own feet. He walked me to the door. He did not kiss me. He did not hug me. He simply shook my hand. He said he would call me. He said he wanted to take me to dinner, not as a boss, but as a man. I said I would think about it. I walked out of the house. I walked to my car. I drove home. I sat in my driveway for a long time. I thought about the lunchbox. I thought about the photograph. I thought about the way his hand had felt when he shook mine. It was warm. It was steady. I realized that I was not afraid anymore. I was not guarded. I was open. I was ready. I said yes to the dinner. We met at a small restaurant, not one of the places he usually goes, but a place I liked. We talked. We ate. We did not talk about the house. We did not talk about the money. We talked about books. We talked about movies. We talked about the future. He told me that he wanted to support my mother's care, not as a gift, but as a loan, something I could pay back when I was able. I accepted. It was a compromise. It allowed him to help without making me feel small. It allowed me to accept without losing my independence. We began to see each other regularly. It was slow. It was deliberate. We did not rush into living together. We did not rush into engagement. We took the time to learn who we were now. We discovered that we were compatible not just because of the past, but because of the present. We had both grown. We had both suffered. We had both learned what mattered. He learned that wealth does not protect you from loneliness. I learned that pride does not protect you from love. We found a balance. We found a rhythm. There were moments of difficulty, of course. There were moments when the old wounds throbbed, when the insecurity crept in. There were moments when I wondered if I was enough for him, and moments when he wondered if he was too much for me. But we talked. We used the tools we had learned. We used communication. We used truth. We did not let the silence grow too long. We did not let the misunderstanding take root. When he traveled, he called. When I was stressed, he listened. When I made a mistake, he forgave. When he made a mistake, I forgave. We built a relationship based on emotional intelligence, on the understanding that love is not a feeling, but a practice. It is something you do every day. It is something you choose every day. A year passed, the seasons changed, the leaves fell, the snow came, the flowers bloomed, we were still there, we were still choosing each other. One evening, he invited me back to the house. Not as a guest, but as a partner. He had changed the deed. He had put my name on the title. Not because he wanted to own me, but because he wanted to share what was his. He told me that the house was too big for one person. He told me that he wanted to fill it with life. He told me that he wanted to fill it with us. I looked at the document. I looked at him. I saw the hope in his eyes. I saw the fear. I knew that this was the final test. This was the moment where I had to decide if I trusted him completely. I signed the paper. I did not do it for the money. I did not do it for the security. I did it because I trusted him. I trusted that he would not use it against me. I trusted that he valued me more than the asset. I told him that I loved him. He told me that he loved me. It was simple. It was clear. It was whole. We stood in the foyer where I had once seen his portrait and felt like a stranger. Now I stood there and felt like I was home. The lunchbox incident was a memory now. It was the catalyst, the thing that had broken the seal and let the light in. I kept the photograph. I put it in a frame. I placed it on the mantle. It was no longer a secret. It was a testament. It was a reminder of where we started and how far we had come. We did not erase the past. We integrated it. We accepted that we had lost time, but we refused to lose anymore. We made a promise to be honest, to be vulnerable, to be brave. We understood that the world would try to pull us apart, that the pressure of his status, the judgment of others, the complexity of our history would all be challenges. But we were ready. We had the tools, we had the trust, we had the love. I look back on that day in the kitchen, the moment I heard the lunchbox move, and I do not feel fear. I feel gratitude. I am grateful for the mistake. I am grateful for the risk. I am grateful that I chose clarity over anger. If I had reacted with defensiveness, if I had quit immediately without explaining, if I had let the shame drive me away, we would have lost each other again. But I stayed, I observed, I sought the truth. And because I did, because I navigated the pain with logic and love, we found our way back. It is not a fairy tale. It is not a story of rescue. It is a story of two people who decided to save each other. It is a story of restoration. Alexander is not the same man he was 20 years ago. I am not the same woman. We are better. We are stronger. We are wiser. We know that happiness is not a destination, but a journey. We know that trust is not a given, but a gift. We know that love is not easy, but it is worth it. The house is no longer silent. It is filled with music. It is filled with conversation. It is filled with the sound of life. My mother is safe. Her care is covered. I have found my footing. I have found my purpose. I am not just a housekeeper. I am not just a partner. I am Ivy. I am a woman who knows her worth. I am a woman who knows her heart. And I am a woman who is loved. The resolution was not in the wealth. It was not in the status. It was in the reconnection. It was in the moment he looked at me and saw me, truly saw me, and chose me anyway. It was in the moment I looked at him and forgave him and chose him anyway. That is the story. That is the truth. It happened because she chose clarity over anger. It happened because he chose truth over pride. It happened because they were willing to do the work. And now, as I sit here, writing this, looking out the window at the garden we planted together, I know that it is real. I know that it is lasting. I know that it is enough. There is no more hiding. There is no more fear. There is only the present and the future and the knowledge that we are together. The lunchbox is gone. I do not need it anymore. I do not need the photograph to remind me of who I was. I know who I am. I am the woman who loved him then and the woman who loves him now. And that is a secret I no longer have to keep. It is a truth I get to live, every day. In every way, the sun is setting again, the light is golden, he is coming home. I can hear the car in the driveway, I can hear the door open. I can hear his footsteps, they are not heavy anymore, they are light, they are coming for me. I stand up, I walk to the door, I open it. He is there, he smiles, I smile, we do not need words, we know everything. And that is all that matters. This is the end of the misunderstanding. This is the beginning of the rest of our lives. It is warm, it is forgiving, it is whole. And I am ready, I am so ready. The journey was long. The path was difficult, but we made it. We made it through the silence. We made it through the secrets. We made it to the truth. And the truth is beautiful. The truth is us.